The Little Mermaid. Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid landed on Danish bookshelves in 1837, about as far from Disney's seashell pop anthem as you can sail. In the original plot, the mermaid still saves the drowning prince and trades her voice for legs, but the deal is rigged. Every step on land feels like walking on knives, and if she doesn't win the prince's heart by dawn on his wedding day, she'll die and turn into sea foam. The prince likes her company, yet marries a neighboring princess, the woman he believes rescued him from the storm. On the wedding ship, the mermaid watches the celebration, knowing sunrise will end her life. That night, her sisters surface with a last-minute loophole. The sea witch will spare her if she stabs the prince before dawn. They hand her a dagger, bought with their own hair. She walks to the newlyweds' cabin, knife raised, then hesitates. Killing him would save her, but she can't do it. Instead, she kisses his forehead, throws the dagger overboard, and dives after it, just as the sun breaks. Her body dissolves into foam. No reunion, no wedding, no triumphant finale. Andersen adds a coda. Because of her self-sacrifice, she becomes a daughter of the air, a spirit who can earn an immortal soul after 300 years of good deeds. Victorian publishers frame this as moral uplift. Modern readers mostly remember the sea foam. Either way, Disney's 1989 rewrite, Mermaid Marries Prince, Rainbow in the Sky, sits on top of a story built from pain, unrequited love, and a that never quite happens. The happiest fairy tales often start with heartbreak and a handful of sea foam. The Adventures of Pinocchio. Carlo Collodi's The Adventures of Pinocchio debuted in an Italian children's magazine in 1881, and the tone was anything but child-friendly. Pinocchio isn't the wide-eyed optimist Disney drew. On day one, he throws a hammer at the talking cricket, Collodi's moral compass, and kills him on the spot. The puppet then runs away, burns his wooden feet while dozing by a stove, and falls in with a con artist, fox and cat. Mid-serial, the story reaches what Collodi meant as the original ending. The fox and cat, disguised as bandits, hang Pinocchio from an oak to rob his gold coins. Collodi writes the moment in full. The puppet gasps for air, shudders, and remained there as though frozen stiff. Chapter 15 closes with a blunt line: the end. Young readers were horrified. Editors flooded the author with letters demanding he finish on a lighter note. Reluctantly, Collodi resurrects Pinocchio for more chapters. A blue fairy appears, cuts him down, and nurses him back to semi-obedience. Still, the violence keeps coming. Attempted arson, donkey transformation, and more swindles before Pinocchio finally earns his real boy reward in the 1883 book release. Disney's 1940 adaptation scrubs nearly all of it. Jiminy Cricket survives, the fox and cat stay comic, and the hanging becomes a brief Donkey Island scare. The result feels like a morality tale wrapped in a wish. Underneath, though, sits Collodi's original warning: ignore your conscience long enough and you might end up swinging from a tree. No strings required. Sleeping Beauty. Giambattista Basila's Sun, Moon, and Talia showed up in 1634, 2 centuries before Disney's pastel castles. Talia, a lord's newborn, is fated to die from a splinter of flax. Years later, she spots an old woman spinning, tries the spindle herself, and the sliver slides under her nail. She collapses into a death-like sleep, so still that her grieving father seals the mansion and leaves her seated on a velvet throne. Much later, a married king hunts nearby, loses a falcon through a window, and climbs in to fetch it. He finds Talia motionless, gathers the first fruits of love, then rides back to his kingdom. 9 months pass. Still unconscious, Talia gives birth to twins named Sun and Moon. One infant sucks the flax from her finger, and she finally wakes, alone, with 2 babies and no clue what happened. When the king's jealous queen discovers the affair, she orders a cook to serve the twins for dinner and plans to burn Talia alive. The cook hides the children and substitutes goat meat. Just before the pyre is lit, the king returns. He burns the queen instead and reunites with Talia and their unharmed children. Basila ends on a tidy moral about fate, but the road there runs through rape, cannibalism, and attempted infanticide. Beats the 1959 Disney film Erases in favor of a chaste kiss and a waltz through rose thorns. Behind Disney's spinning wheels and pink gowns sits a 17th century story where true love's kiss is nowhere on the page, and happily ever after comes after a bonfire. Snow White. Snow White first hit German presses in 1812, when Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm weren't smoothing edges for kids yet. From page 1, the stakes are carnivorous. The jealous queen orders a huntsman to carve out Snow White's lungs and liver so she can eat them with salt, believing a taste of the girl's beauty will keep her young. The hunter spares the child and substitutes boar organs, which the queen cooks and devours. Snow White finds refuge with 7 dwarfs, but the queen keeps coming. Attempt number 1, a lace-tightening bodice that cuts off Snow White's breath. Attempt number 2, a poisoned comb snapped into her hair. Both times, the dwarfs arrive in time to resuscitate her. Attempt number 3 is the famous apple, half red with poison, half white and safe, sending Snow White into a glass coffin trance that lasts until a passing prince dislodges the fruit. Disney simplifies this to one disguise and a cliff fall. The Grimm cycle is more like a slasher sequel trilogy crammed into 10 pages. The darkest beat comes at the wedding. Court messengers, unaware of earlier murder plots, invite the queen. She can't resist confirming she's still the fairest, so she shows up and walks into poetic justice. The king's servants heat a pair of iron shoes until they glow. Forced into them, the queen is made to dance in agony until she collapses dead on the ballroom floor. No lightning strike, no falling boulder, just a slow torture devised by the heroes themselves. Disney's 1937 film ends with a kiss and a sunset ride. The Grimm edition ends with cannibalism, 3 failed murders, and a public execution by footwear. Proof that happily ever after once meant making sure the villain felt every step on the way out. Cinderella. Cinderella reached print in 1812, when the Brothers Grimm were still fine with gore. The ball, the midnight sprint, and the lone glass, golden in this version, all appear, but the search for its owner goes full horror. When the prince arrives, the stepmother shoves her eldest daughter into the shoe. Her heel won't fit, so mother hands over a knife. Once you're queen, you won't need to walk. The girl slices off part of her heel, crams the shoe on, and rides off with the prince. A hazel tree dove tips him off, blood stains the slipper, and he turns back. Round 2, the younger sister tries. This time, the toes are the problem. Same solution. She hacks off a toe, slips on the shoe, and hopes the prince won't notice. Another dove sings about blood in the shoe. The prince returns a second time. Only after both grisly failures does Cinderella, soot-stained dress, intact feet, get her turn. The slipper fits without a drop spilled, and the prince schedules the wedding. Vengeance waits at the church door. Wanting a share of Cinderella's good fortune, the sisters walk as bridesmaids. Doves swoop down and pick out one eye each on the way in. Then, the remaining eye on the way out, leaving both women blind for life. Disney's 1950 film keeps only the pumpkin coach and hummingbirds. No knives, no blood, no blinding. Just a bibbidi-bobbidi-boo to the credits. The Grimm text stands as a reminder. In early fairy tales, social climbing cost more than a midnight curfew. Sometimes it costs toes, heels, and eyesight. Toy Story. Pixar's first full-length draft of Toy Story, screened for Disney Brass on November 19, 1993, and later nicknamed the Black Friday Reel, looked nothing like the buddy comedy we know. Woody wasn't a soft sheriff doll. He was a ventriloquist dummy with hinged jaws, an ego to match, and zero patience for the other toys. In the reel's key scene, he berates Slinky, mocks Mr. Potato Head, and, when newcomer Buzz starts soaking up Andy's attention, shoves Buzz straight out the bedroom window on purpose, then brags about it. The room falls silent, on screen and off. Disney executives call Woody unlikable and the film unreleasable. Production halts. Pixar managers dub the moment their near-death experience. Over Thanksgiving, the story team rewrites from scratch. Woody shifts from tyrant to anxious leader, Buzz's fall becomes an accident, and the ventriloquist face is softened into cloth and vinyl. When animation restarts in early 1994, nearly 70% of the previous footage is gone. The overhaul adds months to the schedule, but saves the studio. By the time Toy Story opens in November 1995, Woody is a loyal but jealous cowboy who learns teamwork instead of delivering threats. The Black Friday Reel survives only in leaked clips and storyboards, evidence of how close Pixar's flagship came to launching with a villain in the lead role. Sometimes it takes one disastrous window push to find a hero worth rooting for. Finding Nemo. Disney Pixar's 2003 hit Finding Nemo starts with tragedy. Coral and most of the eggs are eaten, leaving Marlin to raise the lone survivor. The film sells a touching single dad story, but clownfish biology tells a wilder tale. Every clownfish is born male and lives under a strict hierarchy. One dominant female, one breeding male, and several juveniles. When the female dies, the top male doesn't stay a widower. He switches sex and becomes the new female, a process called protandrous sequential hermaphroditism. The change kicks off in the brain. Hormone signals flip, testicular tissue shrinks, ovaries start forming. Behavior flips too. The former dad now defends territory, while the biggest juvenile steps up as the new breeding male. Researchers see the attitude shift within weeks, and full gonad conversion within a few months. Drop that science into Pixar's timeline, and the plot bends. By the time Nemo hatches, Marlin would already be transitioning into Nemo's mother. The next largest fish in the anemone, eventually Nemo himself, would grow into her mate. In other words, the movie's heartwarming father-son road trip is, biologically, a slow gender swap followed by an incestuous pairing. interesting. Disney understandably left that subplot on the ocean floor. Sometimes the dark origin isn't folklore, but straight biology. Proof that nature can out-weird even Pixar's most imaginative writers. Shrek. DreamWorks bought the children's book Shrek in 1991, but the first screen version that staggered to life was no fairy tale romp. Early tests, 1995 to 1907, mixed motion capture with miniature sets.
No! I'm an ogre! Doesn't that bother you at all?
A sweaty actor in ping-pong ball spandex drove a hulking ogre model, all under the track, "I Got You, I Feel Good." The result looked more body horror than buddy comedy. Studio chief Jeffrey Katzenberg called it terrible, not funny. Tone matched the visuals. Chris Farley had recorded about 85% of Shrek's dialogue before his death in 1997. Story reels that later leaked show an insecure, foul-mouthed ogre who bullies Donkey and drops lines like, "Listen, little donkey, take a look at me. What am I?"
I'm an ogre! Doesn't that bother you at all?
The darkness runs thicker in the discarded script. Shrek's backstory involves humans hunting him for sport, and the movie's lesson is closer to stay away from people than love yourself. After Farley passed, production flatlined. DreamWorks junked the mocap, moved animation to PDI, and recast, with Mike Myers, who demanded a page-one rewrite and eventually the now iconic Scottish accent. New Shrek keeps the burps but drops the cursing. The world stays gross, yet the heart swings to friendship and self-acceptance. Most of the early footage survives only in lost media forums. The ogre who won an Oscar started as a motion capture fever dream with a mean streak. Sometimes family-friendly is less about adding jokes and more about deleting everything that made the focus group flinch. The Prince of Egypt. DreamWorks pushed a PG rating for The Prince of Egypt by staging the 10th plague like a slow-motion nightmare. A whispery black mist drifts through Cairo's streets. Oil lamps gutter out, a palace guard slumps, and at dawn, Ramses cradles the body of his only son. No blood, no livestock, no montage of household tragedies. Just one devastated father and a fade to silence. The Bible's version is not so merciful. Exodus chapter 12 verse 29 states, "The blow lands from the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the captive, and all the firstborn of the livestock." Every Egyptian family, from dungeon to throne room, loses a child. Even the cattle in the fields collapse. The soundscape would have been a wall of wailing, not the film's hush. DreamWorks softened more than the visuals. The movie skips the prior face-off in Exodus 11, where God warns Pharaoh that his stubbornness will cost the entire nation its heirs. Instead, the film frames the death as a tragic price of Pharaoh's pride, heavy, but still focused on a single household for emotional clarity. Scholars note that choice kept the story accessible without rewriting its stakes. The audience sees one child, yet the dialogue implies many more. Historically, though, the plague scale was what finally broke Egypt's power. By narrowing the lens to Ramses and his boy, DreamWorks preserved the heartbreak while avoiding scenes that would have pushed the film past family-friendly territory. On screen, we witness a father's private grief. In scripture, the grief is national. Proof that even an animated epic can only dim, not erase, the darkest chapter it adapts. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to comment which story you thought was the darkest. If you want to see more videos similar to this one, make sure to subscribe and follow the channel.